It's Create Day! If you're new to my channel, thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you'll stick around. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Let's get started on these spring-inspired DIYs. I'll be making over 4 items today. I have this little ceramic bird that I picked up in the clearance section at Hobby Lobby. And as well, this Count Your Blessings sign that was also, I think they were 75% off. And then I have a mason jar from my stash, and this Home Sweet Home tray that I got at Dollar General. It was half price, so I only paid $2.50. I'm starting off with my chalk paint in Cottage White to cover the inside of this tray. I have a piece of cardstock that I'm using as a straight edge to help me just keep from getting the paint onto the sides of the tray. But I ended up ditching it. It was just easier to do it freehand. And I paint the inside edges of that tray a different color anyway, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. It took 3 coats to completely cover the lettering. I decided to prime the rest of this tray with white gesso. I'm going to be using chalk paint, but this wood was really porous and thirsty, so I felt like it would just save me on chalk paint if I could get a good primer coat down first. Now I'm using chalk paint in the color Sage Shadow to paint the inside and outside of the perimeter of the tray. And before we get too far into this video, I just wanted to give a big heartfelt thank you to all of you that have subscribed to my channel. It just means so much to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you so much. So now I'm just using my rotary cutter to cut my cotton drop cloth into the size that I need to fit into my tray. Then I'm applying the Mod Podge onto the tray just at this one end section, and then I'm going to flip the tray around so I can work from the other side. And now I'm going to fold back that drop cloth, and working in sections I will just apply the Mod Podge, smooth it down, and make sure that I'm still getting it straight. I was afraid with this fabric that it would get crooked on me if I tried to do like half and then half again. I wanted to be able to check it the whole way down, so I just did it in sections and made sure that it stayed straight. I'm going to add some transfers from the IOD Whispering Willow collection, and all of these are just so adorable and pretty, so I had to figure out which ones I wanted and then apply them to my drop cloth. I picked out my pieces, and this one that's like a vine with leaves on it, I needed to cut off a couple of the leaves so it would fit onto my tray. And now I need to cut off a few more so that they don't go behind the bunny. And then I figured I could use those, I could attach them at a different section of this vine. So I put them down. I'm just laying this out to see if I like it. And I thought I was going to use that mushroom, but I don't end up using it. But here's where those leaves that I cut off, I can apply those to another section of that vine. And so I just look at how it's all laid out, and then I start rubbing my transfer. But there's a problem. I did not remove the backing. I couldn't believe that I did that. Like, okay, you always remove the backing. Oh boy. So anyway, I finally figured out what I was doing wrong, and then I was able to use the little transfer stick and get this attached to my drop cloth. And this was a pretty thick drop cloth, so it did take a little more elbow grease. Anywhere where it wasn't completely transferred, I had to go back over and work it some more, but we finally got it on there. Then I burnished the transfers with that transfer sheet to make sure they are stuck down really well. Now I'm going to apply my bunny, making sure that I remove that backing first. I'm just going to go ahead and apply him in the same manner and then burnish him as well. Oh, I love this bunny. He is so cute. And now I'm going to apply the leaves that I had cut off from the other part of this transfer. I will leave a list in the description box of all the items I used on these projects. Using my white wax, I am going to seal the inside and outside edges of the tray by just wiping it on with a cloth and then wiping off the excess. It not only seals it, but it also just helps soften up the color that's on there. I wanted to keep the color theme here pretty neutral, and so the white wax just really helped with that. It was already a pretty neutral green, but this just made it that much better. I have some extra large thumbtacks that I got from the sewing section at Hobby Lobby, and some brads that I just pushed in those little pokey ends that you would normally push through whatever you're attaching them to. And I'm cutting off the ends of the thumbtacks so that I can hot glue them down instead of, hammering them down into my tray. And then I clean everybody up with some rubbing alcohol so that I can paint them. I'm starting with espresso bean. It's a very dark brown. I go ahead and give everybody a coat of that. And then I go in with honeycomb, just kind of a light coat of that over all of them. And then I let those dry. Once the paint was dry, I gave them all a coat of the Folk Art Select Seal Matte Finish Polyurethane Sealer. Now I'm going to add some jute twine to the inside of the tray at the bottom where it meets the edges. I'm just going to use hot glue and take that all the way around the tray. This will help hide the seam between the two colors of paint. And to me, it just gives it a more natural, rustic look. Once the sealer was dried on the thumbtacks and brads, I just went in with some Spanish copper rub and buff, and using my finger, I just coated that over the tops and then kind of wiped it off with a cloth until I got the look that I wanted. Then I applied the large thumbtacks, one into each corner, with some hot glue. I'll be using the smaller brad ones in a project later on in this video. And that's how this one turned out. Moving on to the mason jar, I am making a mold from IOD's olive crest mold. I'm going to use this as kind of like a label on the front of the jar. I use cornstarch so that it releases easily, and I gave my mason jar a coat of white spray paint so that everything would adhere nicely. And now I'm just using my Gorilla Wood Glue to apply that label to the front of my jar. And now with my chalk paint in the color Castle, I am going to go ahead and do a coat around the entire jar and the label. And I did not wait until that label was completely dried. I found that if you paint it while it's still somewhat wet, you get less warping, shrinking, and cracking. And now using that same color of Castle, I'm mixing in baking soda. It's half and half mixture. And I'm stippling it on as my second coat. It will help hide any brush strokes. It adds texture. And I'm doing it everywhere except the label. I had mixed some of this French linen with white and added that, but it was just too white. So I went ahead and did another coat of just the French linen. I'm going to be doing some stamps on this bakery paper in Stayzon Ink Jet Black with these little mushroom stamps that I got at Tuesday morning. It was called Inkadinkadoo. And I just, there's a set here, there's two of them, and I really like that one. And I just wanted to try out some different ways to add to it. I wanted to add something. So there was a flower I tried, and that was okay. But in the end, I found this third little lonely mushroom that fit right in there, and that's the one I ended up going with. And I just love these. They look like the old black and white cartoons, like the, Mickey Mouse cartoons. So I just fell in love with these. And I decided to go ahead and use that one, so I cut it out, and now I'm using a water pen. You can just use a regular paintbrush dipped in water to go around it so that I can just tear off those edges so that it gives it a more natural, rustic look. And then I just fit it on there, and I can apply it with Mod Podge. I just fold up one half, brush the Mod Podge on, fold it down, smooth it out, repeat, and then cover up the edges, and then the entire piece of bakery paper. I could have stamped these directly on, except that the rubber around the outside of that stamp hit the trim at the top, and so it would have made it really difficult to get a good image doing it that way. So that's why I chose to stamp these onto the bakery paper and then apply it this way. Now my mason jar gets a coat of white wax. Same thing, brushing it on, wiping it off, and then I use a brush to go around the edges of that mold on the front and onto the top of the mold, just the trim part, not inside where the decoupage is. Now I'm just wrapping some twine around. It's pretty thin, so I go around a couple of times and then tie a knot off onto the side of the jar where I want to add a little tag. I'm using a cardstock tag, giving it 3 coats of acrylic white paint front and back, and then dry brushing some of the French linen chalk paint, concentrating mostly on the edges. Using a small script stamp and some jet black Stayzon ink, I just do a really light stamp onto this tag. I'm using the Iron Orchid Designs Brocante transfer set to find a flower, that one right there, that I want to put on my tag. I just kind of wish I would have cut the stem off a little bit and moved the flower portion down a little bit further. But, it turned out okay. And this applied really easily because it was on a nice flat surface. So I just took a little piece of jute twine, folded it in half, stuck it through that little hole on the tag, and looped that through. And then I was able to, I actually had to add some tape onto the end to get this to thread through the strings on the jar. And then I was able to just go ahead and tie it on there in a knot. And that's how this one turned out. For my little bird, I'm using Sage Shadow, and I'm just going to give this little guy a couple of coats of this chalk paint. And I tell you what, those little bird feet, they came in really handy for painting his undercarriage. I mean, it was just like that's what they were there for. This little guy was so easy, just a couple of coats of paint. When it dried, I wet distressed it with a damp rag around, like around the tips of the wings and the tail, and just various spots on his body. and then just covered him in the white wax and then buffed him up when he was dry, and we were good to go. Okay, our last project, I am coating the raised front part of that sign in my Cottage white chalk paint, 2 coats, and then Castle chalk paint to do the outside edges. Now with Espresso being dark brown acrylic paint and a very small paintbrush, I am just going in those grooves to make sure that they stand out, you know, that there's enough darkness there that they're noticeable. Then I cut out another piece of drop cloth, and I'm going to go ahead and apply that to the front with my Mod Podge. And I forgot to mention that on the tray and this project, I measured my drop cloth in about a 1/2 inch shorter than the width and the length of these items. I mean, you can do whatever you want. I just thought I should mention that. Now I'm just making sure all my edges are good and sealed down, and then we can go on to the next step. And like everything else, this is going to get a coat of white wax. Just on the outside area that's painted the castle gray color, I'm going to brush it on and then wipe it off with a cloth. Next, I'm adding some jute twine around the edge of that raised middle piece with my hot glue. These are the mustard transfers I want to use on this. They came out of that IOD transfer book, Whispering Willow, where I got the leaves and the bunny. And I had to cut off one of the mushrooms because the way it was placed on here originally, it wouldn't have fit. So I'm going to rub on the other 2, and then I can adjust the 3rd one and put him on where it fits better. Now I felt like this just needed a little something extra around that edge. And I had this thicker rope of jute, so I just went ahead and hot glued that around there. I felt like it just kind of tied it together with the little jute string that was around the middle section. I'm using this Select Seal Polyurethane matte finish to just seal that chalk paint around the edges of the drop cloth. And this is what I did on the tray as well, but I just didn't film it. And so now those are those little brads that you saw me painting earlier. And I'm just hot gluing those onto each corner. And this little project will be done. All that's left is the final reveal. Let me know what you think. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.